Let's take a few minutes and look at the cost of incarceration in Canada. How much do you think it costs to build a new prison? Well, in 2014, the cost of building 5 new prisons was assessed at $960 million, which is almost $200 million for each new prison being built. And the cost for imprisoning one woman for 1 year in a federal penitentiary can range from $175,000 to $250,000. And that's just for one woman for 1 year. If you take into account the cost of all of the prisoners for 1 year and the expenditures for court cases and police services, the government is spending almost $10 billion a year. In Canada, the incarceration rate for Indigenous peoples continues to increase. Indigenous peoples in Canada are incarcerated at a rate of 1,024 per 100,000 people. This is almost 9 times the incarcerate of non-Indigenous people, which is only 117 per 100,000 people. Indigenous peoples are overrepresented in Canada's prison population, as they make up only 3% of Canada's general population. This overrepresentation is due to the ongoing legacy of colonial trauma and a broken criminal justice system that disproportionately negatively affects Indigenous peoples in Canada. Further, most people in prison are serving sentences for nonviolent crimes. In 2010 and 2011, only 24% of the prison population was there serving a sentence for a violent crime, which means that 76% of prisoners are serving sentences for nonviolent crimes. Let's do some math. If you add up all the costs for all the non-violent Indigenous offenders in prison, for 1 year they total almost $2 billion. This is how much money the government is investing in the imprisonment and control of non-violent Indigenous peoples. This is absurd, especially given the fact that the government grossly underfunds Indigenous communities. This is especially noticeable when you take into account education funding. In 1996, the Ministry of Northern Affairs and Program Funding was capped at an increase of 2% per year. This cap is a problem, as it does not take into account the cost of inflation or the fact that Indigenous peoples represent the largest growing population in Canada. This is especially a problem for First Nations schools, where enrollment is increasing and funding is capped. In comparison, funding for provincial schools continues to increase, despite the fact that enrollment has actually decreased in recent years. This capped funding for First Nations schools means that these schools cannot afford sports and recreation equipment, library technology, language and culture courses, or vocational training. The fact that the government is investing more in prisons than they are in Indigenous communities is absurd, especially when you take into account the negative effect that being imprisoned has on both individuals and Indigenous communities. Inmates are deeply affected by the violent prison environment long after they leave prison. Being imprisoned also creates barriers for future employment. It interrupts employment history, it erodes job skills, and it discourages future employers. Being in prison also undermines inmates' social connections and stable job opportunities. The effects on communities are also significant. When a large number of people are removed from a community, those left behind bear the social and financial cost. Families lose income, assistance with childcare, and endure large amounts of stress as they worry about the well-being of their loved ones in prison. Being in prison also affects family ties, as inmates are prevented from caring for their children emotionally, physically, or financially. Overall, the community's ability to withstand social and economic hardship is weakened. So, why are we sinking all of this money into a broken system when we could be investing in protective factors in the family and the community that help promote resilience and prevent crime? Protective factors like language and culture, access to healthcare, stable housing, economic stability, social support, and education. These protective factors are all important in the elimination of conditions that lead to incarceration. And these are all areas that are in desperate need of funding. Investing resources in Indigenous communities instead of in prisons increases people's access to education, training and employment, as well as access to basic services, all of which leads to a reduction in crime. Again, why are we investing in this expensive and broken prison system that we know doesn't work, when we could be investing in healthy, strong Indigenous communities? By investing in communities and prevention, and turning the responsibility of justice over to Indigenous communities, The government would be investing in solutions that are culturally sound, and it would be a step in the right direction on the road to reconciliation. We need to build partnerships, not prisons.